The stage is set for an extraordinary confrontation. On one side of the CNN studio sits Alan Dersowitz, the iconic Harvard law professor emeritus who has spent over 5 decades at the pinnacle of legal academia. Known for defending controversial figures like O.J. Simpson, Jeffrey Epstein, and Donald Trump, Dershowitz is more than just a legal expert. He's a brand, synonymous with elite legal scholarship. His credentials are unparalleled. Decades of constitutional law expertise, best-selling books, countless op-eds, and appearances on national television. His name alone commands respect. His reputation precedes him. But tonight, something is different. Across from him sits Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a 43-year-old civil rights attorney turned Texas representative, a product of the University of Houston Law Center, not an Ivy League institution. Crockett is a fierce advocate for her constituents in Dallas, Texas. Her track record as a civil rights lawyer, taking on police brutality cases, fighting for voting rights, and defending the disenfranchised, has already earned her respect. She's no stranger to the courtroom, and her rise to political prominence is a testament to her ability to cut through legal jargon and political nonsense with clarity and precision. But here she is, on national television, facing off against a legal titan who has decades of institutional clout behind him. The stakes are high. This isn't going to be a typical cable news debate. What was meant to be a routine discussion about the constitutional ramifications of Donald Trump's federal election interference case would soon escalate into a clash of two very different visions of legal expertise. One, represented by Dershowitz, believes that true legal authority lies in prestigious academic credentials, Harvard, Yale, and Ivy League institutions. The other, embodied by Crockett, represents the shift toward valuing practical, real-world experience over institutional pedigree. The issue at hand is not just about legal theory, but the broader question of accountability and executive privilege. As a Harvard professor, Dershowitz is used to dealing with these high-level constitutional issues from a theoretical perspective, often relying on the scholarship he's built his career on. For him, the constitutional questions surrounding Trump's case aren't just academic, they're steeped in history, grounded in precedent, and require a nuanced understanding that comes only from years of study at an institution like Harvard. This is where he believes his expertise sets him apart. Crockett, on the other hand, has dealt with constitutional law in the courtroom, in the real world. As a civil rights attorney, she's seen firsthand how constitutional principles play out in the lives of ordinary people who are often marginalized, overlooked, or oppressed by the very systems that claim to protect their rights. She's taken on police departments, fought for voter rights, and advocated for those who have no voice in the halls of power. Her approach is grounded in practical experience, not just academic theory. And yet, on this night, both perspectives are about to collide. It's clear that Crockett is no stranger to legal debates or tough questions. Her experience as a trial attorney has honed her ability to dismantle arguments with precision and clarity. She's been in the trenches, advocating for her clients, navigating the complexities of constitutional law as it applies to real-world situations. But what makes this moment so significant is that she is up against one of the most celebrated legal minds in the country, someone who's Harvard. Pedigree is supposed to be a shield against criticism and intellectual challenge. And that's where Dershowitz miscalculates. He underestimates Crockett's preparation, her ability to think on her feet, and most importantly, her understanding of constitutional law. He assumes that his Ivy League education and academic authority will intimidate her. He believes that his decades of experience will automatically place him on a higher intellectual plane. But what he doesn't realize is that Crockett's legal acumen isn't defined by where she went to school, but by her ability to use the law to fight for justice and hold the powerful accountable. As the cameras roll and the debate begins, the stage is set for a legal showdown that will challenge the very assumptions about expertise and authority that have dominated American legal and political discourse for decades. This isn't just a clash between two lawyers. It's a confrontation between two very different visions of what it means to be a legal expert. And the stakes are higher than either of them could have imagined. In the minutes to come, the audience will witness something that will forever change the way we think about legal authority and the credentials that supposedly define it. What started as a discussion about the limits of executive privilege will quickly become a battle over who has the right to define what legal expertise truly looks like. The question is no longer about constitutional principles. It's about what kind of legal expertise is truly respected in America, and who gets to decide. But the tension is already palpable. The studio lights are bright, the cameras zoom in, and millions of viewers across the country are about to witness one of the most explosive confrontations in legal history. What happens next will leave Alan Dersowitz speechless, and it will reshape the way America views both legal elitism and the new generation of leaders who refuse to be intimidated by it. Stay tuned. You're about to witness history in the making. The air in the CNN studio is thick with tension. On one side, you have Alan Dersowitz, 85 years old, a legal icon whose name is synonymous with Harvard Law School and its elite circles. For decades, Dershowitz has been a fixture on television, the go-to academic when it comes to constitutional law, civil liberties, and high-profile cases that push the boundaries of legal precedent. His resume reads like a who's who of controversial figures, from O.J. Simpson to Jeffrey Epstein, and even Donald Trump. He's become the very image of the Ivy League's intellectual power. Every word he says is carefully calculated. Every argument meticulously constructed from years of academic study and practice. For Dershowitz, law isn't just about understanding the text of the Constitution. It's about unraveling centuries of legal theory, interpreting the Founding Fathers' intentions, and establishing principles that stand the test of time. His career has been built on a belief in the intellectual superiority of those who have been groomed in the hallowed halls of Harvard and other top-tier institutions. To him, a law degree from anywhere but a prestigious school is at best incomplete, and at worst, insufficient for tackling the country's most complex legal challenges. But tonight, he's up against someone who doesn't share his reverence for institutional pedigree. On the other side sits Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a 43-year-old former civil rights attorney from Texas, who now represents her district in Washington. Unlike Dershowitz, Crockett didn't get her law degree from an Ivy League institution. Instead, she graduated from the University of Houston Law Center, a regional school that doesn't carry the same weight or prestige as Harvard. For many in the legal world, that difference could be enough to dismiss Crockett's insights outright, to dismiss her as less equipped, less qualified. But that's where the story takes a sharp turn. Crockett's experience isn't confined to law books or theoretical debates. She spent years fighting in real courtrooms, representing individuals who couldn't afford high-priced lawyers. Her work as a civil rights attorney has seen her face off against corrupt police departments, battle against discriminatory voter laws, and defend the rights of the oppressed. She's spent her career ensuring that the law serves those who need it most, not just those who can afford it. In this way, Crockett embodies the new wave of legal minds sweeping through America, those who value practical experience over academic accolades. These are the lawyers who argue cases that impact real people, who don't just write academic papers or deliver lectures to fellow scholars. They're in the trenches every day, applying the law in the most challenging and often divisive circumstances. Yet Crockett's rise isn't just about professional accomplishments. It's also about representation. As a black woman who rose from humble beginnings, she symbolizes the shift happening across American politics and law, where people of diverse backgrounds are not just invited into spaces that were once closed off to them, but are becoming the leading voices in the national conversation. Crockett represents a new kind of legal authority, one grounded in the values of fairness, accountability, and justice, and not just the theoretical frameworks developed in classrooms decades ago. The debate that night isn't simply about legal theory. It's about the cultural and institutional assumptions that still dominate the legal profession. When you're someone like Dershowitz, who has spent most of his career in the Ivy League, there's a fundamental belief in the intellectual superiority of those who have been shaped by the most prestigious schools. There's an unspoken assumption that a degree from Harvard or Yale automatically confers a higher level of understanding, more refined legal analysis, and more effective solutions to the country's most pressing constitutional issues. But Crockett is here to challenge that assumption. The strength of her argument lies not in her prestigious credentials, but in her ability to connect constitutional law to the lived experiences of ordinary people. She doesn't rely on the ivory tower of academia. Her legal knowledge is shaped by the people she's fought for in the courtroom, by the victories and setbacks she's experienced in front of judges who don't care about academic pedigree, but about the facts and the law. This isn't just a legal debate, it's a cultural moment, a confrontation between two very different visions of what legal expertise is and who gets to define it. As the conversation progresses, it becomes clear that this debate is far more than just a battle over the merits of executive privilege or the scope of presidential powers. It's a reflection of a larger cultural shift, one where the traditional power structures in law, politics, and society are being questioned. Dershowitz may hold the keys to academic respectability, but Crockett holds something just as powerful: the ability to speak directly to the people, to understand the law as it applies in the real world, not just as an abstract set of principles to be debated in lecture halls. In this moment, she represents the future of legal thought, where expertise is no longer confined to the ivory tower, but is instead grounded in real-world applications and the lived experiences of those who know the law best because they've used it to fight for justice. The stakes have never been higher. This conversation isn't just about legal analysis. It's about challenging the very assumptions that have long held power in the legal establishment. It's about dismantling the idea that academic credentials are the ultimate measure of one's ability to practice law, and replacing that notion with a broader, more inclusive understanding of what it means to be an expert. And as the debate begins, one thing is clear: Alan Dersowitz has no idea just how much he's about to learn from the woman across the table. The debate starts innocently enough, with Anderson Cooper, ever the seasoned host, steering the conversation toward the topic at hand: presidential powers and executive privilege. Cooper, accustomed to navigating high-stakes political discussions, wastes no time in getting to the heart of the matter. He turns to Alan Dersowitz first, seeking his expertise on the constitutional questions surrounding the Trump case. Professor Dershowitz, you've written extensively on presidential powers. What do you make of the constitutional questions at play here? Cooper asks, setting the stage for a typical expert commentary. Dershowitz leans forward, exuding the kind of confidence that comes from years of being the go-to authority on complex legal matters. His voice is steady, deliberate, carefully measured as he prepares to drop what he believes is his intellectual bombshell. Well, Anderson, Dershowitz begins, his tone filled with the calm assurance of someone who has spent decades writing and lecturing on such matters. This is precisely the type of issue that requires deep academic understanding of constitutional principles. We must look at the historical precedents, not simply respond to the political noise around it. He continues, his voice slowing down as if addressing an audience unfamiliar with the nuances of constitutional theory. The key question here is whether the president, in his official capacity, is above the law, or whether he should be subjected to criminal prosecution like any other citizen. The courts need to examine the historical foundations of executive privilege to determine how far the protections go. It's a familiar argument, a scholarly take on the powers of the presidency, grounded in Dershowitz's understanding of the Constitution as a historical document that requires careful interpretation. His confidence is palpable, and the audience, both in the studio and at home, expects nothing less than a polished, well-reasoned response from the professor emeritus. But what he doesn't anticipate is the challenge that's about to come. The camera briefly shifts to Jasmine Crockett, who listens intently, taking careful notes. Her face betrays no emotion, but her eyes are sharp, focused, and calculating, like a trial attorney preparing for the exact moment when her opponent's arrogance will slip. Cooper, sensing the tension building, turns to Crockett. Congresswoman Crockett, you've been vocal about holding officials accountable in this case. What's your perspective on these constitutional questions? Crockett's response is as calm as her demeanor, but there's an undeniable strength in her voice. Thank you, Anderson, she begins, her eyes briefly meeting Dershowitz's, acknowledging the elder professor before returning to the issue at hand. While constitutional scholarship is important, we cannot ignore the practical reality of the situation we're facing. The evidence in this case shows a clear pattern of behavior that violates both constitutional principles and federal law. She pauses, letting her words sink in, and then continues with more conviction. The real question here isn't whether the presidency deserves respect. It's whether anyone, including presidents, can be above the law. Crockett's argument cuts through the academic haze with surgical precision. She's not offering a history lesson. She's delivering a statement grounded in the real-world implications of executive power. There's no unnecessary legal jargon here, no reliance on lofty academic theories, just a clear and direct statement of principle. For a moment, there's silence. Dershowitz's expression shifts slightly, his confident smirk fading just a touch. He was expecting an academic debate, a nuanced conversation about legal interpretations and historical precedents. What he wasn't prepared for was the blunt, practical legal reasoning that Crockett had just laid down. Still, Dershowitz is far from rattled. His years of experience in high-profile debates and legal discussions have taught him to expect and dismiss opposing arguments. But Crockett isn't just any opposing voice. She's a force to be reckoned with. Well, Congresswoman, he replies, leaning back in his chair, I appreciate your political perspective, but constitutional law requires a deeper, more nuanced understanding than we often see in congressional hearings. These are complex legal principles, grounded in centuries of scholarship, that require years of study to fully grasp. It's the kind of comment that Dershowitz has likely delivered countless times, a subtle reminder that his academic pedigree has granted him an elevated understanding of legal matters, one that, in his view, politicians like Crockett simply can't match. Crockett, however, is unfazed. Her jaw tightens imperceptibly, but her tone remains steady, measured, like a seasoned attorney who's dealt with this kind of condescension before. Professor, I think you might be surprised by how much constitutional law Congress people actually need to understand. We take an oath to defend the Constitution, and many of us take that responsibility very seriously. Dershowitz tries to wave her off, but Crockett isn't finished. Of course, he says dismissively, as if humoring her. But there's a difference between political understanding and true legal scholarship. The kind of constitutional analysis this case requires comes from academic training and years of serious study. Crockett's eyes narrow slightly, sensing the moment of conflict is approaching. This isn't just an academic disagreement anymore, it's personal. It's a direct challenge to the very nature of what constitutes legal authority, and she's about to strike. I'll tell you what, Professor, she says calmly, her voice carrying the weight of someone who knows exactly what's coming. Let's test that theory. The room goes silent. The camera zooms in on Crockett's face, her calm confidence filling the screen. She's just thrown down the gauntlet, daring Dershowitz to continue his condescending dismissal of her qualifications. The tension in the studio is palpable. Viewers can sense the shift. The moment when this debate is no longer going to be about constitutional law in the abstract, but about who truly holds the intellectual and moral authority in the room. Dershowitz, ever the academic, nods with a slight smile. By all means, Congresswoman. I'm always happy to engage in serious legal discussion. What Dershowitz doesn't realize, however, is that Crockett is about to turn his own arrogance against him, using the very principles he holds so dear to expose the flaws in his argument. The clash has only just begun. And with the stage set, Crockett is ready to show that the real measure of legal expertise has little to do with academic credentials, and everything to do with how effectively you can apply the law when it matters most. The tension in the CNN studio reaches a palpable peak. The confrontation that had seemed like a typical academic debate now feels charged with something deeper. The carefully constructed world of legal elitism that Alan Dersowitz has built over decades is being cracked open, piece by piece. He has just underestimated the woman sitting across from him, and now he's about to make the mistake that will expose the fallacy of his assumptions for millions to see. Professor Dershowitz, Crockett begins, her voice steady but cutting. Since you believe academic pedigree determines constitutional understanding, let's discuss something specific. Let's talk about the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause and its application to executive accountability. The phrasing of the question is surgical. It's precise, it's calculated, and it's designed to put Dershowitz on the back foot. She's not just asking about constitutional law in general. She's asking about a specific, contentious issue that cuts to the heart of the debate. And she's choosing her moment carefully, fully aware of the vulnerabilities in Dershowitz's argument. Crockett continues without skipping a beat, her confidence growing with each passing word. You've argued in several recent interviews that presidential immunity should be broadly interpreted. But doesn't that position directly contradict the Supreme Court's holding in Nixon versus Fitzgerald? Specifically, the court's distinction between civil and criminal liability for presidential actions. Dershowitz shifts in his seat. He was expecting her to challenge him, but not in this way. This isn't a casual debate about theoretical concepts. This is an attack on the very foundation of his argument, referencing a landmark case that directly undercuts his position. Well, Dershowitz begins, visibly caught off guard. Nixon versus Fitzgerald dealt specifically with civil suits, not criminal prosecution. So the two are not directly related. His voice is confident, but there's a noticeable shift in his demeanor. Crockett's question wasn't just probing, it was exposing. He tries to regain his footing, falling back on a familiar line about the difference between civil and criminal cases. But it's clear that Crockett has already moved beyond that. Exactly, Professor, Crockett responds, her eyes narrowing, almost as if she's toying with him. But that distinction is even more relevant here. It's crucial to understand that the court's ruling in Nixon versus Fitzgerald was about limiting presidential immunity in civil cases, specifically noting that a sitting president cannot claim absolute immunity for official actions when it comes to civil suits. She pauses for a moment, letting the weight of the point settle in. And that directly contradicts your argument that presidents should be immune from criminal prosecution. Dershowitz's smile wavers. This isn't the direction he anticipated, and the shift is beginning to rattle him. He's used to being the one in control of these conversations, using his academic expertise to dictate the terms of the debate. But Crockett isn't engaging in an academic discussion. She's applying the law as it's been interpreted in actual cases, not abstract legal theory. Before he can respond, Crockett presses on. Let's go further, Professor, since you value rigorous analysis. How about we discuss Clinton versus Jones? The case where the Supreme Court explicitly rejected broad claims of presidential immunity from judicial process. She's not just asking about case law anymore, she's actively dissecting his entire defense of executive privilege. Dershowitz's eyes narrow as he tries to focus, his mind racing. He had hoped that his decades of experience, his deep knowledge of constitutional law, would be enough to keep him a step ahead. But Crockett isn't fazed by his Ivy League pedigree. She's cutting through his arguments with precision, citing case law that directly challenges his position. The court held that the president is not above the law, even while in office, Crockett continues. This ruling clearly demonstrates that executive privilege doesn't grant absolute immunity from judicial proceedings, especially when criminal conduct is at issue. Dershowitz opens his mouth to respond, but Crockett isn't finished yet. She's built momentum, and now she's about to take this conversation to a level that Dershowitz simply doesn't expect. She leans forward slightly, her voice gaining strength. And Professor, let's go even deeper. Let's talk about Youngstown Sheet and Tube Co. v. Sawyer. She pauses for effect, knowing that the moment she brings up this case, she'll have locked Dershowitz into a corner. Justice Jackson's concurrence, she continues smoothly, establishes the framework for analyzing executive power. And you, Professor, should be familiar with Jackson's 3 categories of presidential authority. Are you familiar with them? There's a flash of recognition in Dershowitz's eyes. He knows Youngstown Sheet and Tube. It's a pivotal case. But Crockett isn't merely asking about it. She's using it as the foundation of her argument to further expose the weaknesses in his defense of broad executive immunity. Well, yes, Dershowitz replies, trying to maintain his composure. Jackson's framework is important, but this issue is more complicated than just applying one case to another. But Crockett isn't about to let him off the hook. Exactly, she says, her voice sharp. Which is why, under Justice Jackson's framework, when a president acts without constitutional or statutory authorization, just like the evidence suggests may have happened here, presidential power is at its lowest ebb. She looks directly at him now, her gaze unwavering. That means the president's claims to executive power are subject to the most rigorous scrutiny, even more so when there's a clear indication that the law has been violated. Dershowitz can feel the walls closing in. He's tried to fall back on his academic theories, his long-standing arguments. But Crockett has already built a case so strong and so relevant to the current situation that there's little room left for him to maneuver. She's systematically deconstructing his position in real time, citing case law that supports her stance and undermines his. But Crockett's attack isn't just based on abstract case law or legal theory. She turns the conversation back to her own experience, grounding her arguments in the real-world application of the law. "You see, Professor," she says, leaning back slightly in her chair, her tone now taking on a new level of authority. "I've litigated constitutional cases involving government accountability. I've argued in front of federal judges about executive overreach. And let me tell you something. The Constitution doesn't care about your title or your position or your academic credentials. It cares about your actions." The words hang in the air, and for the first time Dershowitz looks unsure of himself. Crockett has moved the debate from a theoretical discussion about executive power to the reality of legal accountability. She's not just talking about law, she's living it, applying it in courtrooms where real people's rights are on the line. As Crockett continues, her argument builds in power and precision, and it becomes clear she's not just defending the law, she's defending the people the law is supposed to protect. And for all his academic accomplishments, Dershowitz's arguments seem more and more detached from the practical realities that Crockett knows all too well. "Perhaps, Professor," she says, her voice now carrying a subtle edge, "you've spent so much time in the academic world that you've forgotten what it's like to stand in a courtroom and argue that a government official can't hide behind their position when they violate the law. But let me assure you, that's exactly what real constitutional accountability looks like." The studio is silent now. The camera's trained on the two figures. One, a legal legend who has spent decades building a reputation on constitutional scholarship. The other, a rising political star whose legal expertise comes from years of fighting for justice in courtrooms, not lecture halls. Dershowitz's next words are slow, measured. He's trying to regain control, to salvage what's left of his argument. But he knows deep down that he's losing this battle. And Crockett, undeterred, unbowed, is about to press her advantage, taking her legal argument to a place that even the most seasoned scholar can't easily dismiss. With the momentum firmly in her hands, Jasmine Crockett presses on, her voice steady, confident, and filled with the authority of someone who has spent years navigating the real-world complexities of constitutional law. As Alan Dersowitz attempts to regain his footing, Crockett senses his vulnerability and seizes the opportunity to strike decisively. "Professor," she begins, her tone unwavering, "you've spent considerable time defending wealthy and powerful clients who use their positions to avoid accountability. Jeffrey Epstein, for instance. Can you explain how your arguments for presidential immunity align with your defense of a man who sexually abused minors and was allowed to evade justice?" The words land like a bombshell. The air in the studio seems to freeze. Dershowitz's face flushes with color, his usual poise and confidence evaporating. His connection to Epstein has long been a point of controversy, but now on national television, Crockett has skillfully turned it into a weapon, aimed directly at his credibility. "Let's talk about your record, Professor," Crockett continues, her eyes now locking with his. "You used your legal expertise to argue that Epstein deserved leniency, despite the fact that he had been accused of heinous crimes. You crafted legal arguments to help him avoid full accountability. So tell me, Professor, what does that say about your academic training?" The question hangs in the air, and for a long moment, the only sound in the room is the collective intake of breath from the studio audience. Anderson Cooper looks visibly uncomfortable, unsure of how to navigate this new territory. Even the production crew seems to be holding their breath, acutely aware of the magnitude of what's unfolding. Dershowitz's face turns a deep shade of red. He opens his mouth, but the words don't come out right away. He tries to compose himself, but it's clear that Crockett has hit a nerve. He shifts in his chair, the calmness he once exuded now replaced by an unmistakable unease. "That's completely unfair," Dershowitz finally manages to say, though his voice lacks the same conviction it had before. "I was providing constitutional representation in a legal case, not defending the morality of the actions." Crockett doesn't let him off the hook. "Were you, Professor?" Her voice rises, cutting through his feeble defense. Or were you using your elite credentials and academic reputation to legitimize representing someone who deserved the full force of the law? It's a masterful rhetorical move. Crockett isn't just challenging Dershowitz on legal grounds. She's questioning his integrity as a legal advocate. She's forcing him to reckon with the ethical implications of his defense of Epstein, pointing out that his Harvard pedigree hasn't shielded him from accusations of aiding a predator. As Dershowitz stammers, trying to deflect her allegations, Crockett presses on with laser-like precision. You talk about constitutional law as if it's some kind of abstract theory to be dissected in ivory tower seminars. But let's be clear. There are real-world consequences to the decisions made by the people you defend. Your defense of Epstein didn't just protect a rich, powerful man. It allowed a predator to escape full accountability for his actions. Dershowitz tries again to respond. But this time, Crockett isn't backing down. You argue that a president should be above the law, that executive immunity should apply even in the face of criminal conduct. But you've spent your career defending the powerful and the wealthy, using your academic credentials to ensure that they get away with actions that ordinary people would never be able to escape. The accusation is cutting, and it lands squarely at the heart of Dershowitz's career. He built his reputation as a defender of constitutional principles, but in Crockett's view, those principles only seem to apply when the defendant is powerful enough to afford him. She's exposed a stark hypocrisy. The same legal theories that Dershowitz uses to protect presidents and high-profile clients also allow him to defend individuals who violate the very principles of justice he claims to uphold. Dershowitz attempts a rebuttal, but his words are increasingly fragmented, his usual intellectual confidence crumbling in the face of Crockett's relentless critique. I was acting within the bounds of constitutional law, he mutters, but it's clear that the weight of his own contradictions is bearing down on him. But Crockett isn't finished. With the precision of a skilled trial lawyer, she pivots, shifting the conversation to his recent public defense of former President Trump. Let's talk about your recent arguments. Professor, regarding executive privilege and presidential powers, she says, her voice now sharp, with an undeniable edge of frustration. You've been all over the media arguing that Trump's actions should be protected by executive privilege. But let's look at your own scholarship, shall we? With that, she pulls out her tablet, tapping a few times before pulling up a passage from an article Dershowitz wrote in 1982. The camera zooms in, catching the small screen of her device as Crockett highlights the key text. She reads aloud, in your article, "Executive privilege, a constitutional myth you stated," and I quote, "No president should be permitted to hide behind claims of executive privilege when evidence exists of potential criminal conduct. The Constitution demands accountability, not immunity." The studio is silent. Dershowitz's eyes widen as Crockett continues, referencing his own words from decades ago. "Professor," Crockett says, her voice steady but now laced with incredulity, "either you were wrong in 1982 or you're wrong now. Either way, your Harvard training doesn't seem to have led you to consistent conclusions about what the law actually says when it comes to presidential power and accountability." Dershowitz is visibly rattled. He opens his mouth to speak, but no words come. He shifts in his chair, attempting to regain his composure, but it's no use. Crockett has outmaneuvered him at every turn, using his own scholarship and history against him. The Constitution doesn't change based on who's paying your legal fees or which political party holds the White House, Crockett says, her voice now carrying the weight of finality. It's a living document that applies to all people, not just the powerful and the privileged. And that's the difference between someone who truly understands constitutional law and someone who uses it to protect the powerful at the expense of accountability. For the first time in the debate, Dershowitz looks completely defeated. His face is red, his usual academic arrogance has evaporated, and there's a look of confusion, even shame on his face. He is no longer the revered legal scholar. He is a man exposed. Crockett, on the other hand, stands taller with every word, having effortlessly dismantled the foundation of his arguments while exposing the flaws in his approach to constitutional law. The air in the studio is thick with the weight of what has just transpired. Dershowitz, a Harvard law legend, has been outclassed by a woman whose credentials he once dismissed with a wave of his hand. And the world is watching Crockett's mastery of the law, Her ability to challenge not only Dershowitz's arguments but his entire worldview is undeniable. She hasn't just won this debate. She has reshaped the conversation about what constitutes legal expertise and who truly holds the power in American legal and political discourse. As Alan Dershowitz's credibility crumbles before millions of viewers, Jasmine Crockett steps into the final phase of her attack with a calm yet undeniable authority. She's already shown her legal expertise, her sharp understanding of case law, and her ability to cut through the academic posturing that has long defined the legal establishment. Now, she's about to do something that will cement this moment as a pivotal one in the national conversation about legal power and privilege. The camera focuses on her as she continues, unwavering in her confidence. "Professor, you keep talking about academic rigor, about how constitutional law requires a deep, nuanced understanding," Crockett says, her voice steady but growing stronger with each word. "But I've spent my career litigating constitutional cases, and I've seen firsthand how these abstract legal theories work when real people's rights are at stake." Dershowitz, still reeling from Crockett's earlier blow, attempts to interject, but Crockett doesn't pause for him. She's no longer just responding to his criticisms. She's setting the record straight, dismantling the very foundation of his elitist arguments. "Let's talk about real accountability, Professor," Crockett continues. "You've defended some of the most powerful men in America. But for people like you, people who've spent their entire careers in the rarefied air of academia or representing the rich and powerful, what does it mean to hold someone accountable? How can you understand accountability when you've never had to fight for it in a courtroom, where the stakes are real, where people's lives are on the line?" Her words hang in the air, each one a sharp critique of Dershowitz's worldview. She's not just questioning his academic understanding. She's calling into question his entire approach to the law. She's exposing the gap between theory and practice, showing how years of ivory tower scholarship pale in comparison to real-world legal battles. "You've written volumes on executive privilege and constitutional law. But where were you when people like me were on the ground fighting for justice?" Crockett's voice is unwavering. "Where were you when I was in the courtroom? Fighting to hold police officers accountable for brutality, fighting to protect people's right to vote, standing up to officials who thought they were above the law." Dershowitz's expression shifts, but he doesn't interrupt. Crockett has taken control of the conversation, and now she's leading it to a place that even his academic expertise can't ignore. "I've represented real people, people who can't afford to pay for the kind of legal representation you provide to your celebrity clients," she continues. "I've argued cases before judges who don't care about your academic pedigree or how many books you've written. They care about the facts. They care about the law. And most importantly, they care about the people who are harmed by those in power." It's clear now that Crockett isn't just fighting for a victory in this debate. She's fighting for something much larger. She's challenging the very notion that legal expertise should be defined by where someone went to school or who their clients are. She's proving that true legal knowledge isn't about credentials or prestige. It's about understanding how the law applies to the lives of ordinary people. And it's not just her words that are cutting through the veneer of Dershowitz's authority. It's the undeniable truth in her delivery. Every point she makes is grounded in the real-world application of constitutional principles. She's not asking for validation from the legal establishment. She's demanding that the law be applied to those who need it most. For a moment, there's a palpable shift in the studio. It's as if everyone in the room has just realized what's happening. This isn't just a debate about executive privilege or presidential immunity. This is about who gets to define what legal expertise looks like, who gets to hold power accountable, and whose voice matters in the legal conversation. Crockett isn't just taking on Dershowitz as a legal scholar. She's taking on an entire system that has long privileged academic pedigree over practical experience. And in doing so, she's reimagining what legal authority looks like in America. As the debate continues, Crockett presses on with precision, citing additional case law, building her argument with the same skill and rigor she would use in a courtroom. But she's also doing something more. She's showing the world that legal expertise isn't confined to the halls of Ivy League institutions. It exists in the lived experiences of those who fight for justice every day. And in this moment, she isn't just fighting for herself. She's fighting for every lawyer who has ever been dismissed based on where they went to school. Every person who has been told they don't have the right to speak up because they don't have the right credentials. The stage is set for the final confrontation. Dershowitz has been thoroughly outmaneuvered, his arguments slowly dismantled piece by piece. But the real question now is whether the legal establishment will acknowledge the fundamental shift in how we define expertise, or whether they'll continue to cling to the outdated notion that only those with the right academic background deserve to lead the conversation. Crockett knows the stakes. She's already won this debate, not just because her legal arguments are stronger, but because she has reshaped the entire premise of the discussion. The question isn't whether Ivy League scholars have a monopoly on legal knowledge. It's whether real-world legal experience and a commitment to justice should carry equal weight. The battle isn't over yet, but Crockett has already proven one thing beyond a doubt. The future of legal expertise is being redefined in real time, and the old guard may not be able to keep up. As the segment nears its end, the air in the studio is thick with an unsettling stillness. The debate that began as an intellectual exchange between two legal experts has now turned into a public dismantling of Alan Dershowitz's intellectual authority, and Jasmine Crockett has emerged not only victorious, but empowered. The finality of Crockett's words hangs over the room like a heavy truth. She has won the argument, and in doing so, she has reshaped the narrative about what constitutes legal expertise in America. The immediate aftermath is swift and electric. The cameras cut to a close-up of Anderson Cooper, who's visibly trying to maintain his usual composed demeanor. But even he can't hide his shock. He knows this isn't just another day at the office. He's witnessed something extraordinary. He quietly shifts in his seat, glancing between the two guests. Crockett sits tall, her expression calm but resolute, as if she's already moved past the debate and into the realm of something far more significant, a cultural reckoning. But it's not just the studio that is reacting. The buzz begins almost immediately. Legal experts watching from across the country, attorneys, professors, law students, are already reacting on social media, in legal forums, and in chat rooms. The legal establishment is on notice. In real time, people are questioning Dershowitz's credibility, pointing out the contradictions in his arguments, and recognizing that Crockett's legal reasoning was not only sound but precisely the kind of advocacy the nation needs. Within minutes, social media is flooded with reactions. A tweet from a law professor at Georgetown University reads, "Did Jasmine Crockett just deliver the most devastating takedown in legal television history? That wasn't a debate. That was a masterclass." The tweet goes viral, sparking an online wave of admiration for Crockett's performance. Legal Twitter explodes with hashtags like "Darn Crockett destroys Dershowitz" and "Darn legal expertise beyond pedigree." The clip of her quoting Dershowitz's 1982 article, exposing his hypocrisy, spreads like wildfire. It becomes the viral moment that will define this debate for years to come. At the same time, the legal community is beginning to rethink what it means to be a legal expert. In law schools across the country, professors and students alike are discussing the broader implications of the exchange. The debate was never just about Trump or executive privilege. It was about the value of practical legal experience and the need for a more inclusive understanding of what makes a great lawyer. Crockett's performance demonstrated in real time that true legal expertise isn't confined to those with Ivy League degrees. It can also come from those who've spent their careers fighting for justice in the trenches. As the online world explodes with support for Crockett, the silence from Dershowitz's camp speaks volumes. In the hours after the broadcast, Dershowitz publishes a blog post attempting to explain his earlier remarks, but his damage control only adds fuel to the fire. In the post, he argues that his comments were taken out of context and insists that he respects lawyers from all backgrounds. However, nowhere does he address the specific points Crockett made about his own contradictions, nor does he apologize for his dismissive attitude toward non-Ivy League legal expertise. His attempt to backtrack only serves to further expose his intellectual arrogance. Meanwhile, the silence from many of his former allies is deafening. Legal scholars who once praised him now distance themselves from his performance. Professor Lawrence Tribe, a well-respected constitutional scholar from Harvard Law School, takes to Twitter to say, "Legal expertise is demonstrated through reasoning and knowledge, not institutional pedigree." Tonight's exchange was a powerful reminder of that principle. His words signal the growing discomfort within the legal establishment over Dershowitz's handling of the debate. and his inability to respond with intellectual humility. As Crockett's star continues to rise, the effects of this debate reach far beyond the legal world. Political strategists on both sides of the aisle are taking notice. Democratic operatives, in particular, see an opportunity to harness the power of Crockett's performance. One senior Democratic strategist privately confides, "What Jasmine did tonight wasn't just smart legal analysis. It was a blueprint for how to take down elitist condescension with facts and preparation. This is going to be studied in every political communications workshop." For Republicans, the silence is notable. Conservative commentators who would typically rally around Dershowitz's defense of executive privilege remain curiously quiet. Some fear that the fallout from this debate will resonate far beyond legal circles. The narrative about who truly understands constitutional law is being rewritten, and the old guard may have just lost the battle for public trust. In the hours following the debate, a number of legal blogs and professional publications begin scrambling to analyze the exchange. Crockett's points are verified, her citations checked, and legal scholars across the country confirmed that her legal arguments were both precise and historically accurate. The Harvard Law Review's Twitter account posts a thread breaking down her constitutional analysis, ultimately affirming that Crockett's approach to the law was grounded in legal principles rather than academic theory. The thread ends with a simple but powerful statement: regardless of institutional affiliations. This was constitutional advocacy at its finest. In the wake of the debate, law schools around the country see an immediate surge in interest. The University of Houston Law Center, Crockett's alma mater, reports a 40% spike in website traffic within just 24 hours. Prospective students, many from non-elite institutions, specifically mention the CNN segment in their inquiries. For them, Crockett's performance was proof that real legal expertise doesn't have to come from the Ivy League. It can be earned through hard work, dedication, and a commitment to justice. Even law schools at top-tier institutions, where Crockett's alma mater would traditionally be seen as an afterthought, are starting to reconsider how they recruit students. Several programs begin announcing new initiatives to emphasize practical legal training and civil rights litigation, inspired directly by the interest generated by Crockett's approach to the law. But the most significant shift occurs within the legal profession itself. The divide between those who practice law and those who teach it has always been a point of tension, and Crockett's performance underscores a growing realization. Legal excellence is no longer defined by where someone went to school, but by their ability to apply the law with integrity and to understand how it impacts real people. In the coming weeks, law firms and legal organizations that once dismissed non-Ivy League law schools as inferior will begin rethinking their hiring practices. Crockett's example will serve as a template for how to approach legal talent, looking not just at the degree, but at the depth of real-world experience. For Jasmine Crockett, the immediate aftermath of the debate is transformative. She finds herself in high demand for legal commentary on national television, with multiple networks eager to feature her as a voice of authority. Even within Congress, her colleagues take notice of her newfound influence. Democratic leadership begins considering her for more prominent roles in constitutional and legal discussions. More significantly, Republican members, who might have previously dismissed her legal insights, now approach her with more respect, recognizing the depth of her understanding and her ability to handle complex legal matters. But perhaps the most telling sign of her rising influence comes when the Congressional Black Caucus releases a statement praising Crockett's performance, noting how her demonstration of legal expertise exemplifies the rigorous preparation and constitutional knowledge that Americans deserve from their elected representatives. Crockett's rise symbolizes more than just a personal victory. It signals a cultural shift in how legal expertise and power will be perceived in America. Through her performance, she has shown that the true measure of legal expertise isn't in the prestige of an academic institution, but in the principles upheld and the lives impacted by the law. As the legal world reels from the fallout of this debate, one thing is certain: the establishment will never look the same again. Jasmine Crockett has reshaped the way America sees legal authority, and in doing so, she has made history. As the dust settles from the explosive debate between Jasmine Crockett and Alan Dersowitz, the broader implications of the confrontation become clearer. This wasn't just a memorable moment on cable news. It was a watershed event that will have lasting effects on legal discourse. the way we understand expertise, and how the legal profession evolves in the coming years. The aftermath of this encounter has set the stage for a cultural and institutional shift, one that has already begun to resonate across law schools, legal firms, political circles, and beyond. For Crockett, this moment marks the beginning of a new chapter. She's no longer just a congresswoman with a background in civil rights law. She's now a nationally recognized legal authority. Her understanding of constitutional law, honed in the courtroom rather than the classroom, has become a symbol of a larger shift. That real-world legal experience, not just academic credentials, should be the benchmark for legal excellence. As the legal community begins to process what happened, there's a growing realization that Crockett's approach to the law is not just valid, it's necessary. For years, the legal establishment has been dominated by the idea that the Ivy League holds the monopoly on intellectual authority. Harvard, Yale, and their peers have long been seen as the gold standard of legal education, and those who graduate from these institutions are presumed to possess superior legal insight. But what Crockett has demonstrated is that expertise in constitutional law, or any area of law, isn't just about pedigree. It's about how effectively one can apply the law to real-world issues, how well one understands the human cost of legal decisions, and how committed one is to ensuring that the law serves everyone, not just the powerful. Crockett's performance on CNN has become a rallying cry for those who have long been marginalized in the legal profession. Her rise has proven that there is more than one valid pathway to legal expertise, and it's not restricted to the traditional halls of privilege. The legal establishment is forced to confront a fundamental question. Does the law truly serve justice, or does it serve those who have the power and resources to shape it? As this conversation unfolds, law schools across the country begin to shift their focus. The University of Houston Law Center, Crockett's alma mater, sees an immediate surge in interest. The school's admissions office reports a 40% increase in website traffic within 24 hours of the debate, with many prospective students citing Crockett's performance as the reason for their renewed interest in the institution. It's a reminder that legal education doesn't have to be confined to elite institutions. Law schools from all backgrounds, state schools, regional institutions, and public universities begin to reassess how they can train the next generation of lawyers. There's a renewed focus on practical legal skills, civil rights litigation, and experiential learning, not just theoretical study. Other law schools, particularly those from non-elite institutions, follow suit. They begin announcing new programs that emphasize practical constitutional advocacy and connections to real-world legal practice, directly inspired by Crockett's approach. Students are no longer just taught to understand the law in an academic sense. They are taught how to use it to make meaningful change in the world. The paradigm shift has begun. Meanwhile, Crockett's impact on the legal profession continues to grow. Legal blogs, websites, and even legal textbooks begin referencing her arguments and her approach to constitutional law. Legal commentators, once skeptical of her credentials, now openly praise her mastery of legal reasoning. It's clear that the professional landscape is evolving, and the old definitions of legal excellence are being redefined. Even within the Ivy League, Crockett's performance has sparked internal reflection. Several prominent professors, including some from Harvard, begin questioning the traditional emphasis on academic pedigree as the sole measure of legal authority. These professors aren't dismissing the importance of rigorous academic training, but they are now more open to the idea that legal education should also encompass diverse perspectives and real-world experience. In private discussions, some begin advocating for changes to the way legal professionals are trained, pushing for a broader and more inclusive approach to legal education. Perhaps the most profound impact of this confrontation is on the way the public perceives legal authority. Before this debate, people who were educated at prestigious schools like Harvard were often presumed to be the only ones who truly understood the law. But Crockett's performance, her sharp legal mind, and her ability to dismantle the establishment's arguments have shown the public that true legal expertise comes from the ability to think critically, apply legal principles effectively, and stand up for what's right, not just from where you went to school or who your mentors are. Politically, Crockett's performance has already begun to influence the way Democrats and Republicans approach legal debates. Democratic strategists recognize the power of Crockett's message, a well-prepared, confident voice of legal reason can dismantle elitist arguments and show that the law is about more than political power. Her methodical dissection of Dershowitz's arguments has set a blueprint for how to challenge established power in the political and legal arenas, and it's one that many will study in the coming years. On the Republican side, the silence after the debate speaks volumes. Many conservative commentators, who would have typically rallied behind Dershowitz, have opted not to comment. Their absence underscores the fact that Crockett has changed the conversation. Her success in this debate has highlighted a growing dissatisfaction with the political status quo and the perception that elite credentials are too often used to shut down meaningful debate, rather than encourage it. This silence from conservative circles also suggests that Crockett's influence extends beyond the legal profession. It is permeating the political discourse in ways that many had not anticipated. The legal community, especially those from non-elite law schools, begins to recognize that the same biases that have kept them on the margins of legal power for so long may be fading. Crockett's success isn't just a personal triumph. It's a signal to every lawyer who has been overlooked based on where they went to school, to every legal professional who's been told their expertise isn't valued because it doesn't come with the right credentials. Her performance has made them visible, given them a voice, and validated their work. The debate has catalyzed a broader reckoning in the legal world, a rethinking of what it means to be a legal expert and who gets to claim that title. Law schools are beginning to reevaluate their curricula. Legal professionals are reassessing their hiring practices, and the public is questioning whether the legal establishment, long dominated by a select few, truly represents the diverse voices and experiences that make up American society. Most importantly, Jasmine Crockett's performance on that CNN stage has ignited a conversation about the future of law in America, one that isn't shaped by who has the most prestigious degree, but by who can use their legal expertise to advocate for justice, fairness, and accountability. The era of deferring exclusively to elite academic credentials is coming to an end. And as Crockett's influence continues to grow, it's clear that the new era of legal thought has already begun. Jasmine Crockett has not only demonstrated her expertise, she's redefined what it means to be an authority in the world of law. And in doing so, she has made a lasting mark on the future of the legal profession, American politics, and the ongoing struggle for equality and justice. As we reflect on this historic moment, one thing is certain. Legal excellence is no longer defined by the school you attended, but by the way you apply the law to make a difference in the world. Crockett has shown us all that real legal expertise lies in fighting for what's right, not in what institutions claim to be the standard of authority. The immediate impact of the debate between Jasmine Crockett and Alan Dersowitz is undeniable. What began as a legal exchange between two seasoned professionals has now grown into a nationwide conversation about the very essence of legal authority. Crockett's performance has done more than just win an argument. It has ignited a shift in how Americans view the law, legal expertise, and the systems of power that shape the way the law is practiced. As the dust settles, one thing is clear. This debate represents a pivotal moment in legal and political discourse. The legal world is in the midst of a transformation, and Crockett has become a central figure in that shift. Her ability to stand toe-to-toe with an academic titan, armed only with real-world experience and a sharp, principled understanding of the law, has proven that legal expertise is not confined to Ivy League degrees and institutional prestige. Instead, it is about how well one can apply the law in practice, how one uses the law to advocate for justice, and how one stands up to the powerful when they misuse the very system that is supposed to protect the public. The cultural implications of this debate go far beyond the legal profession. It has sparked a broader conversation about who gets to claim authority in various fields: politics, law, and even education. For years, many have assumed that those with the most prestigious credentials are the ones who should hold the reins of power. But as Crockett's performance showed, those assumptions are being challenged, and the way forward may involve embracing diverse voices and real-world experiences over traditional hierarchies. In the legal world, law students, young lawyers, and professionals from non-elite institutions have been inspired by Crockett's example. They now understand that their backgrounds, whether they come from regional law schools, public universities, or have worked outside traditional legal institutions don't make their expertise any less valuable than that of someone with a prestigious Harvard or Yale degree. The idea that expertise in the law is built through practical application, hard work, and a commitment to justice, rather than just through years of academic study, is now taking hold across the profession. As law schools reconsider their recruitment processes and adjust their curricula to focus more on practical legal skills and diverse experiences, the conversation about what makes a good lawyer is expanding. The shift toward acknowledging real-world legal work and civil rights litigation, areas that have long been undervalued in elite legal circles, signals a broader, overdue change in how lawyers are trained and what they are expected to do with their legal education. Moreover, Crockett's success offers a template for how others in politics and law can respond to elitist condescension. Her ability to remain calm, to wield legal facts with precision, and to question the very foundations of established authority provides a roadmap for those who feel marginalized by traditional power structures. This moment proves that one doesn't need a name-brand degree to take on the most formidable intellectual opponents. All one needs is a sharp mind, a commitment to truth, and the courage to challenge the status quo. For Crockett, this is just the beginning. While her legal expertise is now recognized on a national scale, it is her broader vision that will continue to shape her career. Her future in Congress, in legal advocacy, and potentially in national political leadership seems all but assured. Her rise is not just a personal victory, it's a victory for everyone who believes that the law should serve the people, not the powerful. In the political sphere, Crockett's ability to challenge Dershowitz's arguments and expose the contradictions in his defense of the powerful has resonated with people across the political spectrum. Democrats see her as a model for how to engage in principled, fact-based debates, while Republicans are quietly acknowledging the strength of her legal acumen. Regardless of political affiliation, Crockett has shown that legal expertise, when rooted in fairness and integrity, can transcend party lines and resonate with people from all walks of life. Perhaps most importantly, this debate has highlighted a fundamental truth that many Americans have known for a long time. Real expertise isn't about where you come from. It's about what you know, how you apply that knowledge, and how you use it to serve others. In this era of increasing polarization and division, Crockett has become a unifying figure, someone who has shown that the law can, and should, be used to fight for justice and equality for all people, not just those with power or privilege. As this historic moment is replayed on legal blogs, in law school classrooms, and across media platforms, it will be remembered not just for the legal arguments it showcased, but for the larger cultural shift it represents. In a world where elitism often goes unchallenged, Jasmine Crockett has shown that expertise is earned through action, through integrity, and through a relentless pursuit of justice. For those in the legal world, for young lawyers just starting out, and for everyday Americans, the lesson is clear. Never underestimate someone based on where they come from, where they went to school, or what their credentials look like on paper. Judge them by what they know, how they think, and what they stand for. And as we look to the future, one thing is certain. The conversation about legal expertise, power, and authority has been forever changed. Crockett's performance has set a new standard for how we define legal excellence, and her legacy will continue to inspire generations of legal professionals who understand that the law's true purpose is to protect and serve all people, not just the powerful. This moment is a reminder that sometimes it takes a single courageous voice to challenge the entrenched systems of power and change the course of history. Jasmine Crockett's voice is that of a new generation, one that will not be silenced, one that will fight for what's right, and one that will ensure that the law remains a force for justice, equality, and accountability.